Hi everyone. Welcome back to yet another engaging panel discussion. Is EdTech India's next global export? I would like to welcome a moderator for the session, Mr. Pranjal Kumar, Head of Education Fund and CFO, Bertelsmann India Investment. Thank you for joining us today, sir. Now welcoming our panelists, Ashish Singla, Director, Large Enterprise Fund, PayPal India, Saurabh Saxena, Founder and CEO, UAble, Mohan Lakham Raju, Founder and CEO, Great Learning, Santanu Paul, CEO and MD, Talent Sprint. Now, before I hand it over to Pranjal sir, I request all the delegates to keep posting their questions in the chat box, and the panel will address the selected few at the end of the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the introduction. Unfortunately, I'm getting some echo. I don't know if that's the case with other participants also.
Yeah, I'm also facing the same. Yeah.
I request everyone to go on mute, and as we speak, we can switch on our unmute ourselves.
Okay, so if I can request the other panelists to be on mute.
Now it's okay, sir.
Yeah, that's helpful. Well, thank you so much. Super excited to be moderating this panel on a very, very hot topic, and of course, having the right panelists and the esteemed panelists to be, talking about this theme. As you all know, EdTech has, I would say, burst the charts as far as India is concerned over the last few months, and clearly it's a talk of town in India, and not just in India but also globally. And it seems like the opportunity and mind space for EdTech has arrived globally now in India. But just sort of before we tee off, I would request each panelist to maybe spend half a minute talking about why they're here. Actually, why should actually they be talking about this topic, right? And what's their linkage with EdTech? So Ashish, maybe you can get started.
Sure, Pranjal. Thanks. Very glad to be here. So I'm currently heading the large enterprise business at PayPal. And one may wonder, what is a payments person doing in an EduTech forum, right? And to answer your question, Pranjal, see, EduTech was a very, very small vertical till last year for us. But the pace at which it has exploded in this year, now it's the second largest vertical for us, right? And given the breadth of companies that we work with, that's the kind of knowledge that I wanted to share, and thought it'll be value for others who are trying to venture in this space to see how other companies are doing and how PayPal can be adding value. Hope that's helpful. Again, thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ashish. I think that was extremely helpful. Mohan, can you go next, please? Mohan, you're on mute, so can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Thanks for having me on this panel. My name is Mohan Lakham Raju. I'm the founder and CEO of Great Learning. Great Learning is one of the market leaders in online professional learning and higher education in India. And we are increasingly becoming a global learning provider. So our programs are in-depth, hands-on programs that help working professionals and graduates transform their skills and achieve career progression. We started in India 7 years back, and about 2 years back started going outside. And now we have a learner footprint across about 140 countries. And so we have a good perspective of what the learning experiences and expectations from learners are in India, as well as in developed countries. So I'll be happy to share more insights based on that.
No, awesome, Mohan. And of course, congratulations on the recent campaigns that Great Learning has been running. It is
Thank
really, it's a talk of town. So congrats on that. Shantanu, if can I request you to, just speak a few minutes, of course.
Sure. So my name is Shantanu Paul. I'm the founder and CEO of Talent Sprint. Talent Sprint is a provider of high-end professional education to young professionals as well as working professionals. For example, some of our coding boot camps are very well known globally. We run with Google the largest diversity young women engineers coding bootcamp in the world, which is based out of India. In addition, we run high-end professional education programs with IISc Bangalore, IIT Kanpur, IIM Calcutta, etc. So, for example, take one example. Our fintech program with IIM Calcutta is the leading program in the country by far in that sector. Similarly, we've started something in digital health with IISc. So, a whole range of niche programs in premium professional education. So, that's our background.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know the kind of work you guys are doing with, I would say Indian Ivy League schools, like IISc, it's truly path-breaking. So again, congrats for putting together such a rock-solid business. We've discussed professional learning, but we also have Saurabh, who is a serial entrepreneur and is starting another stint in the K-12 space, but a different, a unique one, not the typical test prep one. Saurabh, do you want to just talk about yourself and you able?
Sure, man. Thanks a lot for having me here. So I have been in education for the last 15 years. And before this, I built two companies in the test prep and K-12 domain. First one was a chain of learning centers in North India, which was for test prep. Then I built my second company, Vedantu, which is one of the leaders in online live tutoring space in India right now. And I built that out from 2011 to 2018 before I exited. So at Vedantu, we started with one-on-one tutoring, and we added models like one-to-few classes, then one-to-many classes, where star teachers conduct live broadcast sessions for children all across the country. And so after spending 13 years in the typical K-12 test prep business, I started to realize, especially when I became a father myself, that future of education needs a lot of models beyond curriculum. And when I thought about my daughter, the kind of learning system she should be a part of, I thought real world skills, 21st century skills like creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, and so many more are super critical. And schools are not enough. Traditional education system is not enough. And I thought the time has come when EdTech should also focus on building these real world skills. So that is why I came out of Vedantu, started UAble after taking a break for 6 months. And UAble focuses on developing these real world skills in children through programs like helping them becoming an entrepreneur, YouTuber, artist, author, and a range of other programs. It has been exciting, and I think, happy to be here and contribute.
No, lovely, lovely. And I think I can totally relate to that story. I have an 8th grade daughter, and after the testing her with all the various K-12 tutoring platforms, now she's come back to me and said she wants to do K-pop. So hopefully, UAble is giving something on K-pop, and I'm sure she will be a first of your customers to do that.
Of course.
So I have an 8th grader also who's into K-pop.
He's also into K-pop. So there's the answer why EdTech is global, right?
BTS all the way.
Yeah, all the way. Yeah, absolutely.
That's the gen next for us. They are not satisfied with the standard curriculum anymore. Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
No, glad to have you, Saurabh, and it will be interesting to get your perspectives, especially on that side of the market in EdTech. Now, of course, the topic of today's discussion is EdTech the global export from India? And before we get started and get your point of views on the various themes around that, let me pose that question directly to you, and maybe you can answer in yes or no, right? And no holds bar here, guys. Do you really think that EdTech is the next global export from India? Ashish, maybe we can start with you, given your experiences at PayPal.
Sure.
Yes or no, that's it. I mean, no explanations, just yes or no.
Oh, absolute yes.
Absolute yes. Mohan, what about you?
Yeah, strong yes as well.
Strong yes. Shantanu?
It's a yes with some qualifications.
And Saurabh, from your eyes?
Yes, with some qualifications. It depends on the cases, but yes, strong yes.
Yeah. No, I think so as well. I think it's a strong yes, but yeah, there are there are segments to it. So why don't we just go a little deeper on that particular topic, and maybe Shantanu and Saurabh, since you qualified it, right? What are the qualifiers? What are the considerations here?
Okay. You want me to go first?
Yeah, Shantanu.
Sure. So, I think the basic premise of this question itself is that, doing an export business out of India is a desirable thing. And of course, we are, I'm sure, highly motivated by the history of successful such export businesses out of India. So the two sectors that come to mind, one is the IT/ITES sector, which has been the crown jewel of India's export story for the last 30 years. The other one that is less talked about, but equally dominant globally, is the generic drugs and bulk drugs market, right? Where we are seen as the biggest supplier of generic drugs to countries like the US. So in both these cases, developed countries depend upon India either for low-cost software delivery, reliable, etc., or they depend on India for providing them low-cost medicines. Now, if you look at those two business models, clearly the operational side, etc., in terms of delivery, operations, being able to run the businesses successfully, scaling, quality, all of that, these two sectors have achieved. So there's no reason to believe that in EdTech that cannot be done. I believe the entire back-end operations of doing such business, I'm sure EdTech can replicate because there's enough history in India to show that we've done those things really well, right? The challenge, though, is that in the nature of the marketing and sales process, both those sectors that we look upon as great success stories for India are fundamentally B2B business models. The customer on the other side is an enterprise. Right? In the case of EdTech, if you really look at EdTech, the predominant model that's working today for all of us is either a B2C model or a B2B2C model. It's not a B2B model that people are trying to talk about as a great story. So that's my short view, that unless we can solve the sales and marketing problem, which is a DNA problem, a co-location problem, a brand problem, some of which I'm sure we'll talk about, it's not clear to me that solving the backend alone will solve the entire problem.
Yeah, and just with that, Shantanu, is the rationale for that still low cost, good quality talent availability in India? Is that the rationale and the same theme that which played out in ITES and in generic drugs that you think will play out in EdTech if it does?
I don't think so. I think this is a market which will really reward global quality. And I think this is not an area where low cost is going to be the primary driver. It may be to some extent in content development, etc. But I think the great trainers, live classes, online platforms, they all have to be extremely world-class for a B2B2C or a B2B2C experience to really work. So I don't see this as low cost is definitely a benefit, but it can't be the leading benefit for this whole market.
Got it. And Saurabh, what are your perspectives? I mean, of course, one question that is there in everybody's mind is education homogeneous across the globe, right? And there are certain themes which are homogeneous and there are certain others which are not. K-12 being one example where test prep could be different in different countries. So how do you see that, and why the qualifier that EdTech is global, but there are certain considerations to keep in mind?
Yeah, Pranjal. So I think, that's why I said it will depend case to case. So when you are building a EdTech company for test prep or very localized after school tutoring, for example, the curriculum, the standards, everything is very different in India, in Singapore, in US, and the other countries. So I think that is where the qualifier comes from. That if you are building curriculum focused programs, scaling it globally becomes tougher, right? If it is curriculum independent, which is more global, which is focused on certain skills, building certain mindsets and the skills that are relevant globally, then the relevance is far more in building a global business. If I'm building it for teaching math to children in India based on CBSE, ICSE curriculum, it's not easy to adopt to the curriculum of US and other countries because there are many variations, and that's why it has never been homogeneous education as a market, right? So that is one. Second, I'll completely agree with Shantanu on the point that he makes, that it is not just about low cost. We have seen in past also companies trying to use the price arbitrage of selling low cost tutoring, low cost programs to other countries. But now I think the times have changed. Now, if an Indian company is thinking about global expansion, quality should be the first focus. And I think what has changed in past few years is the desire, the aspiration of Indian entrepreneurs to build world class products. And that is how I look at it, that if you can build world-class products, the ability, the rigor that Indian entrepreneurs and Indian companies bring to scale any world-class product globally, and which can be homogeneously scaled globally, I think that is where the opportunity is. And opportunity is not in building a typical test prep or tutoring-focused business globally.
And Saurabh, just on that, do you think that the Indian entrepreneurs and the Indian, investors and the Indian ecosystem has that global mindset, or there's still some way to go there?
Definitely some way to go, Pranjal. Honestly, what I have seen is, and I have I've been on both sides of the story now, because at Chewable, what we are trying to build is something of global relevance, because we are beyond curriculum right now. And in past, I have seen something that I've built for Indian users, and even from other countries. When we had users, they were majorly Indian diaspora who used to flock in to a platform. So when we talk about building for the global market, the mindset needs to change at various levels, because the typical marketing and sales approach that works in a market like India might not work in other countries. I mean, for example, typical telesales approach will not work in a market like US, right? So those mindsets needs to
Or
change.
fleet on street.
Or feet on the street. I mean, can you imagine people in Boston and California roaming around and going door by door and selling edtech products? So definitely no. So I think the mindset that needs to change is from a very human-centric, forced marketing and sales process to building products that can scale by themselves, right? And I think that mindset has still not changed, but good to see the ecosystem evolving. Some new products that I have seen in recent months have been very, very exciting. And I think there is some way to go, but there's a lot of potential there.
No, makes sense. Makes sense, Saurabh. Interesting insights there. And maybe that's a great segue to a question for Mohan, right? Mohan, I mean, you've been a investor before, looked at global models. You are a successful entrepreneur today, and again, Great Learning is attempting to go global, has some global programs. Beyond sales and marketing, I mean, what are some of the other differences that you find in global edtech companies and India-centric edtech companies?
Yeah. So I think I'll echo some of the points that the fellow panelists have made, right? So, if I look at three key differences between traditionally what has happened in US or global companies versus Indian companies, right? So the global companies, particularly the Silicon Valley based companies, try to solve the problem with product and tech, right? So that has always been their approach, be scalable from day one and solve everything with product and tech. That's the approach that they take. Right now, whether that is actually the best possible way to solve in education, I don't fully agree with that. Right? But that's what their DNA is. The second aspect is that I find that the US companies, many of them actually, focus on scalability, oftentimes at the expense of outcomes. Right. So if you had to basically prioritize, right, I believe scalability is prioritized more than outcomes. Right. So that's the second. And in India, you have to focus on outcomes because otherwise people won't pay you. Right.
Yeah.
So in India, people don't really value. I mean, it's changing. So I'm like making some broad generalizations, right? But like there are always exceptions. But I think in India, you can't like get a premium because the product is very good to use or very well
Cool.
designed, right? So those are all
Product is
kind of
cool.
yeah, exactly. Those are taken for granted. In the US, you can get paid for product experience. In India, not quite there yet. So people in India pay for outcomes. So therefore, Indian companies are a lot more focused on outcomes compared to, let's say, the Valley companies, on a relative basis. The third dimension I'll say is that US Valley companies are largely focused on self-serve, right? So if something has to be done, again the DNA will be how do you basically enable the customer to solve the problem for themselves, right? So whether that problem can be solved by them or not, is kind of a secondary criteria. Let's basically try to get them to solve it by themselves. That self-serve mentality is very, very prevalent in the Bay Area. Whereas in India, I mean, we grew up in a culture and we operate in a culture where we hardly solve problems for ourselves, right? So we always basically try to call somebody or like try to get somebody to solve the problem, so that self-serve mentality is not there. So so India that way requires a lot of support and hand holding. So these are kind of the differences to so I agree with Saurabh and Shantanu that first of all the opportunity is there where the same learning actually translates across the world, right? So if there are regional specific, curriculum specific, or board specific, those things won't scale. For example, in the area that we are operating, where we are helping people learn digital skills, right? So that's a fairly global thing, right? So data science or AI is the same whether it is in the US or in Germany or in India. There are certain language and accent differences, but that's a kind of a solved problem, right? So India has solved the accent problem in the past, and I think that's a solved problem. So I think the opportunity, and I also agree saying, there is absolutely no compromise for quality. So as long as we are able to offer quality and rigor, then as long as you meet that expectation, then I think the cost differential can give you an edge, right? Because you're able to service and you're able to fulfill a certain expectation and a certain outcome, at a potentially lower cost. So we are finding, for example, so our learning is there's a lot of support and hand holding, right? So you get a lot of mentorship, you get a lot of guidance, and all of that often delivered by a human. And these humans, the human mentors, are there everywhere in the world, right? So it's a distributed network. But we find that in the US, that is resonating with people because that is something that is not offered by competing products, alternatives that are there. So when we are offering that human touch that is getting appreciated, and we are able to do it at a price point that people are not used to experiencing it at. Right. So anytime a human is involved in a US delivery experience, the costs are very, very high. Right. But because we are able to do that, but that doesn't mean that, we are offering an inferior quality or an inferior outcome. Right. So as long as that is there, you add this touch that is getting valued, and actually that is what is kind of giving us the right of passage to operate in the US market.
Oh, very interesting. And I think what you're also potentially implying is that edtech companies which have been so far in India are actually maybe better placed, right, to win the markets globally because of our ability to focus on outcomes and our ability to handhold the learner during the journey. And my favorite sort of theory on that is just like how US brought Amazon to India and brought the convenience economy in India. Can India actually bring the handheld economy globally, right? And actually power that? And that's a very, very interesting point you made.
And this is a different handheld, right?
This is a different handheld, exactly.
It's not that we normally talking about this.
This is a virtual handheld. Let's
This is
say.
a virtual handheld. That's true. That's true.
I was going to say to the earlier point, if you try feet on the street, go door to door selling, you'll get shot in the US.
Yeah, I mean that is a different topic. We can talk about that. But Ashish, then does it mean that you actually are in the right place at the right time and ensuring enterprise business for edtech companies, for PayPal in India because they are going to get global, and that's where your KRA is, and globally that's what PayPal is trying to do as well. I mean, is that how I should see it? And the fact that there's a lot of hope and now proof points emerging that these edtech players in India will actually now conquer the world and of course make lots of money and help you make a lot of money.
No, Pranjal, absolutely. In fact, I took over this role 6 months back, right? Just a sales role. Earlier, I was doing strategy and operations. And the first thing that we did this was post-pandemic, that just focus on education, right? This is a growing sector. Everything else, we were seeing like travel, which was 30% of our business in India, just going zero, right? So we said, okay, let's go after education. And education is the growing sector. So I just want to build upon some of the things that my fellow panelists said, right? The one key thing what we are seeing from where India is making a difference is the personalization piece, right? What Mohan was also talking about, right? Indian companies are able to add that personalization to the whole virtual way of learning, and that at a price point that makes sense, right? Which means imagine at a K-12 segment, right? I've been part of the corporate life all through, not like entrepreneurs here. Means we all have gone through virtual learning courses and things like that. And keeping that interest and things like that, right? For a K-12 segment is very, very difficult. We can imagine that. So that kind of a personalization definitely makes a lot of difference. The second element that I wanted to add upon that is the companies that are successful, and a lot of work is going on in the Indian space, is around socialization, right, of education. Right? How do you add social elements, right? Because a kid means whether it is a young kid, like I have my own two daughters, right, sitting in front of a laptop whole day, going through various courses and things like that. you need to connect them back to the world, connect to their peer group, and create some sort of engagement, right? So, like, means I'll give you an example. PayPal, as a company, we acquired a company in the US called Venmo, right? It's a peer-to-peer money transfer business, right? So what Venmo did uniquely was added social elements to it, right? Made it more social to even exchange some money from one person to another. And it was wildfire, right? Means there, it will be very hard to find a millennial in US who does not use Venmo. It's become a verb, right? Venmo me, right? That kind of whatever in India we have equivalents of that, right? So means adding a social element, which a lot of companies are focusing on, especially in the K12 segment, I think will be really kind of making a difference. The last, given I'm on the payment side, I mean, it will be a miss for me to call out that how do you make the end-to-end experience, including the payments, not as an afterthought, right? Means when you go to any paywall in India, right, you'll see plethora of options, right?
Yeah.
It's not just credit card, debit card. There will be net banking, there will be UPI, there will be X wallet, Y wallet, and things like that. And it's not unique to India alone, right? Every country in the world has their own payment methods, right? Like Germany, bank funding is very, very important. Similarly, if you go to Brazil, there is something called Boleto, right? Then credit becomes very, very means used to in developed markets, right?
Yeah.
So how do you means kind of bring an end-to-end experience for your consumers, which kind of takes care of what they need and making it seamless? So those are some of the initial thoughts and why I feel India strongly will make a mark in this segment.
Yeah. No, and I think Ashish, maybe, on that one, just again, given that you are potentially more independent in this panel than all the others are, let me pose that question to you. You mentioned post-COVID, it's become a strategic interest for you.
Yes.
Are you seeing edtech and globalization of edtech by Indian players as a fad, which is post-COVID, and once the COVID starts to rest, things will start coming back to normal? Or you think that, this is actually going to be a trend? I asked the other panelists, I'm sure I'll get the, biased answer. So I want to ask you this question as a potentially unbiased person.
No, absolutely. That's a great question. And I get that question means from globally within PayPal, right? Are you focusing so much on this sector? Means is it going to continue and things like that?
So have you built the escape path for you and if you don't meet your sales target, then what happens, right? So, maybe,
Exactly. So let me give. So overall, see, at a global level, let me start at that right. What we are seeing generally online means offline to online, right? Means education is also going from offline to online.
Yeah.
The trends that we were expecting to hit in 2030, we are seeing today, right? During the pandemic. So the whole thing has shrunk by 10 years. That means online trends. Now, a lot of countries across the globe are going back to normal. That's what I was talking to Mohan earlier, that in like countries like Singapore or lot of developed countries, things have gone back to normal. People are going back in their normal life, but the growth trends are not slowing down, right?
Sure.
For the education sector, we still see a lot of interest, and this continues. And I'll share a personal example, just kind of as we were talking about, right? I have a 5-year-old and a 10-year-old kid, right? Earlier means my typical weekend for all of us, right? My wife, myself, we'll spend juggling from one class to another, right?
Yeah.
Going from one part of the town to another part of the town and spending most of our weekends over there.
Yeah.
And we never wanted to try online, right? But now, when it was forced upon us, right? Means it's like my wife, in her own words, online chalta hai, right? Means not even chalta hai, it is working well, right? How much time it is giving back to us, it's not even funny, right? So net, yes, means there is definitely a fad. I would not say that, but the new normal would be very, very different, and it will accelerate what we would have seen 10 years from now, 2 means kind of maybe 5 years trend is what we would, where it will stabilize.
No, that's very interesting, Ashish. Thanks for that perspective. And I think that's again segues into another interesting question, which is habit formation, right? And you talked about habit formation being formed. And this is a question I'll pose to both Shantanu and Mohan. What about brand building, right? Do you think brand building causes or leads to habit formation? And as edtech is getting more and more mainstream and democratized, right, with people like my wife, Ashish's wife, I'm sure your spouses, etc., also adopting online and now starting to understand the value of education services delivered online. Do you think that this is the right time to build a brand? And will that further enhance habit formation? Maybe Shantanu, you can start off because I know Mohan would potentially, I know what his answer would be.
Sure, no, absolutely. So happy to address this. I actually listened to Ashish with great interest as he was talking about this. So I spend about 30% of my time in the fintech world as well, and I can tell you that what COVID reminds me of in terms of edtech is what Demon did for us in 2016 December for fintech, right? So in some sense, at that point in time, everybody went cashless, not because they wanted to be cashless, because cash disappeared from the market, right? So people went to digital, and there was a surge. And then later on, as cash became available, people continued that surge of digital payments. And today, if you look at the UPI numbers month on month, you will see that we are practically at 1,000-fold adoption of digital payments compared to where we were 4 years ago in terms of India. Just look at UPI numbers alone. So I think new normal formation is definitely happening. Habit formation is certainly happening. Without a question, the new normal will be some kind of a pendulum swing, and it will be caught in the middle, much more 10 years ahead of what we were maybe 4 months ago, like Ashish said. But certainly there is a huge value to contact and in person, which I don't think we should undermine in the rush towards celebrating edtech. I think there's a huge value that brings as well. Having said that, your specific questions about brand, I think the question about any kind of a B2C business building powerful brands, I think that's a given. The answer is you have to build it. The question can be about how you build it. It's not about whether. It's not about whether you should do it. The answer is how do you do it, right? And there, I think I'm sure answers will vary.
And what would be your preference in the
yes,
house?
Yeah. So my preference, of course, and Mohan, I'm sure will have a different view. I think it depends on the segmentation of the market that you're going after. If you're going after serious learners, so I always say that Talent Sprint's approach has been a serious learner, right? Somebody who really believes in the joy of learning and wants to master a subject. So in our view, the word of mouth approach is going to be far stronger. And using an NPS-based model, feeding into the entire feedback loop, ensuring a high quality experience, a tremendous user experience, which can be both technically a superior experience and human assistance being a superior experience. So in some sense, using the entire delivery experience process to build a more graduated business and then use the customer word of mouth as your primary fuel for building the brand, to build a highly trusted brand, if I may call it, is where I think we will go, right? And in that sense, it is different from a heavy advertising approach.
Mohan, to you, do you think Virat Kohli can accelerate this flywheel that you just talked about?
Absolutely. So, see, I actually completely agree, with him and, your earlier point. Right? Ultimately, education is a consumer service, right? Like in any consumer service, the trust in the brand matters, right? So for people to try something, and, early adopters will always take risk. And they're going to try things based on somebody telling them or because of curiosity. All of those things will happen for the early adopter segment. Right. And what we observed is that for us, the last 6 years, 7 years, that was the early adopter segment. And we started seeing mainstream adoption beginning to happen. And once you get to that point, then you start answering the question, how do you reach mainstream? And, brand building definitely is the most proven strategy for reaching the mainstream and getting yourself into people's consideration set, knowing that you exist. Right. And that's where at least my belief is that, like in other consumer products, in education, what matters for long-term success, the first and foremost is learning outcomes. Right? If you don't have learning outcomes, then nothing else matters, right? Nothing is sustainable. You have to have high quality, you have to have learning outcomes. So you have to deliver on the promise that you are actually, setting expectations on. Okay. The second, of course, is brand, being known, right? Being known for that quality, having your brand encapsulate that, having people trust. All the education brands that have been built historically, right? They're all built over decades, and people trust them. Why do so many people fight to get into whether it is the IITs or IIMs? Because
Yeah.
those brands have been built over many, many years. They're known for their quality. They're known for their, the what happens there. Similarly, globally, all the successful education, brands are massive brands. Right. So in education, that credibility is extremely important, and that's what we realized as well. And so these are the two considerations. One is to have our focus on learning outcomes translate into credibility for our brand. Right. That is number one. And second is, to be able to reach the mainstream audience, particularly because now learning has become mainstream for all the reasons that we talked about earlier. So let's say 3 years back, our product portfolio was also fairly niche, but now, we have a portfolio where there is something for everyone. And increasingly, that's going to be the case, right? We're going to have something for everyone. And therefore, it's a more getting to more learners, in a condensed manner.
No, Mohan, I think that's interesting. And I know we're running short of time, as the moderator also highlighted. But maybe I'll take one last question, and this is for Saurabh. It's sort of a question to you. Global conquest, will Indian companies do, or will Chinese do it? If you look at the China market, you look at the kind of K-12 market, players that are appearing there. Why do you think Indian edtech companies can conquer what China has already demonstrated through their digital companies? Of course, US is helping us in that regard by blocking them. But what do you think?
Yeah, well, that factor itself is a big factor, and it's gonna play its part. So yeah, but if you see, I mean, if you look at some Chinese companies, they are very wired in into the Chinese ecosystem, and that has been the case for many years. While they can still come out and build products for the global market, but education won't be that easy because of the language barriers, because of the kind of content, kind of behaviors that the users show in China. For a company from India, I think targeting markets like Southeast, targeting markets like US and other developed markets is far easier because we understand those markets. We understand that ecosystem far better. That kind the mix that we get of users from, for example, for an Indian entrepreneur to understand what kind of expectations a US mom has. I mean, whether it's an Indian mom residing in US or a native in US is far simpler, and that is why I feel that products coming out of India will become far more relevant in these global economies because our understanding of outcomes, and as Mohan rightly said, because we are so focused on outcomes and our understanding of these users is far better, and language barriers are far fewer for us. For Indian companies to scale globally, it's far. I think the potential is far higher than Chinese companies, honestly.
And not to mention data privacy and protection, right? I mean,
100%, definitely, yeah, that's a big factor. Yeah,
that's a factor. No, great, Saurabh. And I think since I have you, anyways, on this, maybe I'll pose the next question which has come from the audiences. And the question is, how are you planning to have entrepreneurship lessons for school students to be future ready? I mean, school students in entrepreneurship, long shot.
Yeah. So I think, see, what we are targeting is a very different approach. We are saying children need 21st century skills. Children need to be ready for the real world, and just learning math, science, and going to tuition classes, while it's important for your outcomes and academics, but building real world skills needs a lot of projects, lot of real world experiences. So if I pick up an entrepreneurship is just one kind of program, one kind of experience that we provide for our children on UABLE. For schools as well, and we get a lot of demand. A lot of demand for UABLE's programs is coming from school networks because we actually literally complement the school system. We don't provide after school tuitions. We say these are the things that schools are not able to do, and in non-IB and the non-premium schools, that is the domain that we are talking about. So schools keep asking us, can you implement the curriculum that you have around being an entrepreneur, being an astronomer, being an artist, being an author, and develop these 21st century skills like creativity, critical thinking in schools. So how we do that? Very simple. We follow a simple pedagogy called project-based learning, and which is a big term in countries like US already, but we are bringing that in countries like India as well, where children go through these experiences of designing a business plan, coming up with 100 ideas to solve a social problem, actually prototyping that idea, discussing it with their peers, posting it on our communities and clubs online. There's a lot of social learning element that we are trying to build. And I think that is super exciting for any child, whether they're coming directly from the B2C channel or whether a school wants to sign up for our programs online. So yeah.
No, I dread that. I dread the day when you teach my daughter negotiation skills, because every second day she's saying, "Okay, I'll make a deal with you. I'll make a deal with you." So,
So she's already there, isn't it?
so it's a. But I get it, right? I mean, the skills are need to be sort of quote unquote dumbed down to their level, but they're equally important. I get that.
Yeah.
Super interesting. I think the other very pertinent question raised by one of the audiences is uh, the world globalization was the mantra pre-COVID, and maybe now that globalization has become bubbles, right? You have air bubbles, you have social bubbles, you have other bubbles, right? So it's more bilateral and not global anymore, is how it appears to be. Now, in that kind of a scenario, do you think there is actually a chance for Indian companies to become global, or actually it's just about India, US? And if I reflect on our conversation today, right, it's largely been an India, US conversation, right? So is it going to be just bilateral, or actually it's going to be global? And it's an open question. Any panelist, who feels confident, address it, please do.
So I can share our experience. So yes, while US being a very large and dominant market plays a significant role, we have been able to have fantastic response from Africa, for example. Okay, and in Africa, the problem that I feel that we are solving is one of access, right? So in the US, I talked about what we are solving, right? We are solving something else. In Africa, it's an access problem. Okay, so there the education systems, particularly online education ecosystem is not as well developed. The options that they have available to them are not that many, right? So it's a different problem that is there, and it is absolutely working. Of course, they have affordability challenges and all of those, just like in India, right? But I think so that's a unique thing as far as Africa is concerned. Similarly, when we talk about like Middle East, right? Middle East has its own dynamic, right? And there you are. So the value proposition that you provide, whether it is Africa, whether it is Latin America, whether it is Southeast Asia, Middle East, right? In all of these places, the nuances are there, and the value proposition varies what they are looking for, and that's what you have to cater to. Yes, the US will continue to remain the biggest market, just given the size of the economy and the size of the opportunity. But that doesn't mean that we cannot serve the other geographies as well.
Got it.
If I may just add to this point, what Mohan said, if I may just add, I think two abstract comments. One is, I think, I remember many years ago when I was in the US and doing my graduate work, one of the professors told me that if you want to build a global company, your first customer should be in the US, because that's the definition of a global company, right? I mean, by opening up a US market, you create aspiration around the world for people to have that product. So in some sense, there is nothing wrong in saying I'm a US focused global company, because that's where the action will be. And I think we have to go there as a very predominant focus area for sure, right? So that's, I think, an important consideration to have. The second point I want to make was your earlier point that, I think the world is getting, in some sense, deglobalized because of all the factors we talked about, right? The global politics today is a very nationalistic, inward-looking politics in almost every country. So everybody is doing XYZ first, whatever their definition of XYZ is, their own countries. But having said that, the digital economy is integrating. So we have two contradictory threads going on at the same time, right? On one side, everyone's putting up tariff barriers, trade flow barriers, et cetera, labor barriers. But on the other hand, if you look at digital money, look at fintech, you look at all the other trends, the integration of flow of money, ideas, and concepts, I think, is extremely fast. And in some sense, the digital economy is going faster, even though politically the world might be getting deglobalized. So I don't think there are two identical things. There are two different trends that we have to separate.
Interesting. It makes sense. I think we just sort of run out of time here. It's already at around 2 o'clock. So unless there are any sort of final comments, from any of the fellow panelists, I think it was a very engaging session. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it. Hope you guys did as well. My only sort of comment on my personal take on this topic is I strongly believe that education is the next global export from India. That's been one of our theses also when we make investments, and it's starting to play out. I'm glad that the companies are also doing that. And for us, I think the way we see this is that it's a global delivery model, and Shantanu, you would, I'm sure, can resonate with that, where you have center of excellences in multiple geographies, right? So your product team is sitting in the valley, like Mohan you mentioned, right? Because they're product first mindset people. Your backend is sitting in India. Your sales team is sitting in Boston because they need to now partner with institutions. So it's a truly global delivery model, and I think that sort of a model is something that is starting to shape up in various companies, and I hope that comes true. And education actually becomes the next ITES of India. So on that note, thank you all. Thank you very much for your time and for this engaging conversation. And I hope we took some key gems from this discussion.
Thank you, Pranjal, for hosting us.
Thank you, Pranjal.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.
Glad to be.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for our excellent speakers and our moderator for being here with us today. I would also like to thank our delegates. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned for more such exciting conversations.